I'm Frankie Boyle. There comes a time in every comedian's career when he decides to do travelogues. Like a racehorse being put out to pasture to eat sugar lumps and have sex with donkeys. So I'm off on a tour of Scotland. I've decided that I really need to reconnect with the place, playing a bunch of smaller theatres around the country in preparation for a big run in Glasgow and Edinburgh. I haven't toured Scotland since 2012, and back then I spent most of my time in hotel rooms and dressing rooms, struggling to get porn on a 2G reception. But this time I'm going to explore Scotland, finding the real nation beyond the clichés and tourist traps, meeting some of its most unique people and considering some of its most important historical characters. You'll see me stare into the middle distance, in a hotel, seated and from the stage. I'll be meeting people with beards, statues without beards, and fighting a man because I want to win his beard. As I tour Scotland, I'll finally find a way of talking to my therapist about my father and take part in a vegetable-based séance. And wherever possible, I'll be throwing money at unnecessary drone shots, just like this one.
I think my favourite royal story at the minute, have you seen this story? They've got a plan to evacuate the Queen in the event of a Brexit riot. Who in the middle of a riot is thinking, let's do the Queen? So, I mean, you're trying to steal some laurels and some minstrels out of a burning Asda, and you stop yourself and you go, no, do you know what I need to be doing? I need to be sprinting across open moorland towards Balmoral, to where the Queen is lying in wait for you, by the way. The Queen has been preparing for this like fucking Skyfall. Prince Philip bursts out in his Jeep like fucking Mad Max. The Queen starts to assume her dragon form. The Queen has a dragon form. That's why Pall Mall is so long and wide. It's a kind of runway for the for the Queen's demonic dragon body to get airborne over a riot. That's why we have flypasts at royal occasions. We're just reminding the Queen, hey, we have the firepower to subdue you. Watch the Queen on the balcony. She always looks up at the red arrows like that. Rawr.
While I'm on the road, I'll be thinking a wee bit about language, which is a big preoccupation for stand-up comedians. I'm going to encounter Scots language, English language, sign language, and of course, some bad language. Swearing is different in Scotland. Here, the word fucking is just a warning that a noun is on its way. On this journey, like so many promising show business careers, I'm starting in the capital, but ending up doing a gig in Aberdeen. I know Edinburgh well, from many years performing as a stand-up at the Fringe.
There's really like two Edinburghs, like economically. There's huge inequality here. Much as it's like two cities economically, there's also like two festivals as well. The festival's very different for local people. I remember like when I was just starting out in comedy, I was doing something for, I can't remember what it was for, but I was doing vox pops around Edinburgh, talking to locals. I goes to like pretty much the first guy I talked to, I went, are you excited about the festival? And he was like, yeah. I was going, what do you like about it? And he was like, tourists dropping money.
During the Edinburgh Festival, the city swells in population by almost 200,000 cunts. Anywhere on the Royal Mile you could throw a rock and hit a juggler, or I suppose you could use a hammer. The Edinburgh Fringe is a place full of hope, which is probably why I'm not really welcome anymore. But I came to see one show that ponders a difficult transformation of a young man from addict to performer to prize-winning author and social commentator. Darren McGarvey has become well known as a voice for the unheard or ignored, and in much of his show he rails against class stereotypes while attempting to rationalise his sudden change in circumstances.
Now, travelling first class will not represent any sort of conflict for many ABC ones in here. Indeed, they will have become accustomed to that quality of life. Any contraction in which will make them feel very aggrieved, almost like they're experiencing some form of oppression. But when you are raised in a community where it's grained in you from a very early age that people who travel in first class are in fact wankers, then you can imagine the inner conflict felt by me.
After the show, I caught up with Darren as we climbed up to the inner sanctum of a multi-storey Illuminati sex temple to talk about how he feels language has empowered him and how it has been formative for both of us.
Darren, loved the show, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really good. It's really self-critical and it's really reflective. I wonder like how huge an effect language can have on people sometimes. I remember like when Lara Croft, what's it called, Tomb Raider first came out, me and my pal, we were sitting in this flat down in London, someone's showing us this game, right, like the first one, and it's like she hangs off these big blocks, and I was going, so it's basically a game about dreeping, right? And they were like, what are you talking about? And I was going, well, you know, you like dreepy off a wall, and they were like, no. And I was like, well, you climb up a wall, right, and if you couldn't get back down by jumping, it's too high, you have to hang yourself off and drop. And yeah, I'm like, you don't have a word for that? And they were like, no. I was like, what did you do when you were up a wall when you were a kid? And they were like, we got stuck. We'd have to shout for our mums and stuff. And maybe because you don't have the word.
That's a great point, and I think that also applies to social problems in politics, where if we're all using different terminology to describe the reality around us, then, you know, we'll lose the ability through language to start to conceptualise what a solution to a problem might look like, or what even the problem is in the first place. The good thing about language is that everyone has access to it, or most people have access to it. It's just when you start making pronouncements about what is the right language and what's the wrong language, that's when it becomes exclusionary. From the classroom to the courtroom, lower class people are conditioned that there is a voice of reason and there is a voice of authority, and that voice, whether it's Jeremy Kyle or whether it's a newsreader, is always middle class.
It's very hard to shake that, isn't it? So I remember like one of the first days I was at uni, so I went to uni in England, telling people about what a scramble was in Glasgow. Do you know what weddings? Did you have that?
Money.
Yeah.
And everybody.
So the father of the bride had come out with a whole load of like change, right? Like maybe 50p's if it was a good wedding, right? And just fire it into the gutter. And like the kids would like fight each other for it. And this to them sounded like the opening scene of a musical or something, and it sounded terrific. And you sort of learn to go, well, maybe file that memory away.
Edinburgh at festival time is overrun with performers and tourists. During August you could club a man unconscious here, and so long as your face was painted, people would assume it was theatre. It's also Scotland's most literary city, with 3 branches of W.H. Smith, and home to many of its greatest writers and thinkers. Some are commemorated with statues, but one of them has his own monument. No single writer has done more to define the very idea of Scotland. Sir Walter Scott was born in 1771 in Edinburgh's Old Town, although it was newer then. He contracted polio and developed a limp in childhood. Only in Scotland would they build a monument with so many stairs to a guy with a limp. Edinburgh's Waverley Station is still the only train station in the world that's named after a novel, which is a pity, as who wouldn't want to get a bus replacement service from American Psycho? Scott initially wrote his novels anonymously, as novel writing had no real social standing, and it wasn't clear if it was something that a poet should be concerning himself with. The ambiguity about the authorship of the novels contributed to their popularity. It's the same reason that Prince Harry is more popular than Prince William. Scott was not without his critics, but in his romanticising of Highland tropes among lowland Scots, Scott hit on a vision of a more unified idea of Scotland that has persisted to this day. This sequence can mean only one thing. My gig material at the end of the show is unbroadcastable, so we're bulking up with road shots. I've left Edinburgh to travel north in this very comfortable and surprisingly fuel-efficient Volkswagen van. During the war, a considerable percentage of Volkswagen's workforce was slave labour from concentration camps, but that's a whole different documentary. For now, I'm travelling up Scotland's east coast to Peterhead, where tomorrow I'll spend a day in prison. Before that, I'm spending the night in a hotel that has a unique role in one of the world's most famous novels. I'm here in the Kilmarnock Arms Hotel. Kilmarnock Arms sounds a bit like a euphemism for a heroin junkie. He's wearing a long sleeve shirt today, he's got the Kilmarnock Arms.
It's a kind of horrible joke, but a very nice hotel, it has to be said. And this is apparently where Bram Stoker wrote the first few chapters of Dracula. And if you want to write about the undead, then the greater Peterhead area in the off-season is a good place to start. Some people say about Dracula, they say that Bram Stoker was a deeply sublimated homosexual. He was in a sexless marriage. He spoke out against homosexuals publicly, but he started writing Dracula a couple of weeks after Oscar Wilde went to jail. So some people think that Dracula is an expression of his frustrated sexuality. You know, a story where you get bitten on the neck by a guy and life changes forever. I think, isn't that just a case of we want to imagine that public figures were really unhappy? You know what I mean? I like to think that Bram Stoker came up here every year or so and got shagged really hard by a local farmer or a gilly or something. And he'd just look down at his own white knuckles on his style. And then he'd come back here to the hotel and write Dracula standing up.
Peterhead Prison was once the most notorious in Britain. Thankfully it's now a museum and they've built a nice shiny new prison next door to it. I've never been in prison, something which I attribute to being lucky enough to get a proper education, where I learned that bleach destroys DNA.
Up here. Perfect, thanking you. Now you don't have any mobile phones, communication devices, nothing on the prohibited lists?
No, I don't.
Perfect. If you just pop through our permit, can I get you to take your belt off from it and your shoes and your glasses as well? Sometimes that sets off the metal detector.
Right.
Any filming that requires me to take off my belt, trainers and glasses gets me a little nervous.
And your glasses as well. Right, so you got a metal detector on you. Perfect.
But it's all reassuringly thorough. People are certainly going to struggle to break into this place.
And turn around for it. Perfect, thank you.
My glasses have fallen into my shoe. It's a good start to the day.
Not surprisingly, entering a prison has a certain tension about it, which I try to ease with my legendary small talk.
Wow. It's a beautiful day to go to jail.
It's lovely. Oh, it's lovely.
Right, cool.
So this is where we're at, in terms of our education department.
The education department is deep inside the prison, a space for inmates to express themselves artistically, giving them a much-needed outlet for their frustrations and hopes. I'm here to join a Scots language class that's part of the prison's rehabilitation programme.
All right. How you doing, man? I'm Frankie.
Chris,
All right.
nice to meet you.
How you doing, buddy?
The new facilities are disarmingly modern, and the following section will probably disappoint viewers who've tuned in hoping to see someone blinded with a sharpened lunch tray. The class is run by Alistair Heather, who encourages the guys to see their local dialect of Doric as just as valid as standard English.
Something that we're trying to push at Aberdeen University is the validity and legitimacy of Doric as a means of self-expression as part of the Scots language family. But Chris, you're quite a confident, kind of educated guy. What's your experience of Scots been?
I speak Scots with my pals, you know, we'll speak it, but in school you're merely taught to speak English, you know what I mean, and try to speak properly. So
Aye.
yeah, it's a kind of, you get pulled between the two.
That kind of biding in two worlds simultaneously linguistically is a really common experience for Scots speakers. So, the different kind of dialect regions of Scots, like some words will be popular in a dialect and they'll kind of fall out of favour in others. So, for example, in Glasgow until quite recently, they would say bairn for child, and they would say ken for knowing something. But they didn't do that anymore. And it's just things go in and out of fashion in different dialect areas.
I had this friend, Ali, who was like, worked in a comedy club, but he was from Fife.
Aye.
And he was always talking about his bairns. He was going through this divorce. And I had this other pal who used to come down to the comedy club, and he was like from Northern Ireland. This guy kept going on to him about his bairns and how worried he was about his bairns. And it turned out, like weeks later, the Northern Irish guy thought he was talking about his balls. He'd never heard this word before. thought he's like, he's getting separated from his balls now.
So you got sports, vocab, you were saying Fitba Park, absolutely.
Head the ball actually has nothing to do with football, does it? It just means a nutter.
Heed the ball.
Heed the ball, aye.
Heed the ball does mean nutter, aye.
And stoke the ball means a paedophile.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It is just different dialect regions had different influences and had different fashions in speech.
Absolutely. Especially like Ayrshire, like everyone I've known from there is like, it's dead different from Glasgow. So you've got people who say things like, what you crime?
Would you say that around here? Would you cry him?
Yeah, it's like, what's your crime?
Which is a subject we're not covering today. Thank you, Christopher.
We're put into groups and assigned the task of writing a sports report that uses Scots vocabulary.
We go to school. We know that shit is not us. It's not past football.
To the best of our knowledge.
Pause.
That's our fifth sentence.
Despite a Dreith day and a minging pitch, the Broch blew Celtics 10-0, all due to their new star signing, Lionel Messi, who recently transferred to Barcelona after being exposed as a stoke the ball, who flitted to Scotland as due to the lack of extradition treaty post-Brexit, he can't get booted out the country.
Legal disclaimer, Lionel Messi is not a stoke the ball, to the best of our knowledge. Ali, you get this thing from people sometimes where they go, you sing with Scots, I don't know anyone that speaks it. And I was thinking, no, they don't speak it to you. Like, they have different registers for people and they know that you're the sort of person who's not receptive.
You could wander about the North East only speaking English and think, well, nobody here speaks Scots, so they're all speaking English. But if you go to Belgium and you only speak English, Belgian folk will just speak English to you. It doesn't mean that the languages there didn't exist. 50 years ago, there was nobody much teaching Scottish history because Scottish history was considered to be a minor adjunct to English or British history. And now there's a whole industry of Scottish history. And Scots language is just part of the same process of rediscovery. It's now OK to be Scottish again, and we're exploring what it is to be Scottish. And to do that, you need a language.
I left Grampian prison filled with a sense of hope, but also a lingering regret that I'd not managed to sell any of the pornography I had strapped to my torso. I enjoy a moment in the fresh air, contemplating the many crimes I've got away with over the course of my life. I'm a lucky man. Scots is one of 3 individual languages in Scotland, alongside English and Gaelic. In 1462, the laws of the Scottish Parliament were recorded in Scots. Either that or the guy who was doing the writing was having a stroke. Scots has a number of sounds that are never used in English, most notably that high-pitched, guttural sound of anguish we make when we find we're sat next to someone from Hampshire at a wedding. Scots is a Germanic language in its own right, as is English, which makes it confusing when Americans say if it wasn't for them, we'd all be speaking German. The truth is that if it wasn't for Germany, you wouldn't be speaking English. Mary Queen of Scots' ancestor, James I, wrote poetry in Scots, including a famous poem he wrote in prison called The King is Quare. But that happens to a lot of guys when they're in prison. Imagine, the king hands you his book of poetry. No matter how bad it is, can you really be honest? Really good, you managed to rhyme dog with cupboard. Clever you. James VI was another Scots poet, but when he moved to England as the British monarch, he sought to develop English as the unifying language of the kingdom. Shakespeare wrote Macbeth for James to satisfy his obsession with witches. English began to eclipse Scots in Scotland. Now that court had moved to England, rich Scots wanted to sound English. They eradicated Scottish sounds, grammar and vocabulary. Scots was seen as unsophisticated, backwards and vulgar. We speak Scots in the form of burns for 1 week a year at school, where if we speak it well, we win a prize. But then for the rest of the year, if we speak Scots, we're given a punishment exercise and sent to the headmistress. It's a perverse situation and confusing for our population. It's like being allowed to play the trumpet for a week and then getting the belt for whistling. I've played every city and major town across Britain, which goes a long way to explain why I'm like this. Each town has their own unique character. It can be anything from pessimism all the way through to despair. The grey granite buildings of Aberdeen have an imposing feel, but when the sun shines, the city is stunning. The people of Aberdeen have a phrase to describe the way the city's granite sparkles in the sunshine. The phrase is, almost never.
I like playing in Aberdeen. The people are really friendly. People get the wrong idea about Aberdonians. They think they're very dour. And maybe they are at first, but they're quite jolly people. The city it's most like, I think, is Bristol. You know how Bristol's like a place where a whole bunch of country people seem to have decided to just live in a city? It's a bit like that. And the gigs can be good here. I think for me the most judgmental crowds are actually Glaswegians. Glasgow's the only place I've ever actually managed to lose an audience during an encore. Let's get this guy back, see if I hate him or not.
My stage material isn't designed to be for everybody, but I've never wanted any potential audience member to be excluded. That's why every tour I've done for the last 20 years has included a sign show for the deaf. Why shouldn't deaf people have the chance to hate me too?
I got one of those Apple phones that you unlock with facial recognition technology. I think the trick is to set it to your cum face. So if you get mugged for your phone, at least they're going to have to wank you off first. It's weird getting older as well. When I was a teenager, ejaculating was like a fucking firework going off. I'm 47 now. When I ejaculate, it's like Tim Robbins escaping from Shawshank. Tell you who I quite like? I like Jeremy Corbyn. I think he'd be a good Prime Minister. He's like 70, he'd get assassinated with an air horn or something. Do you know what I mean? It'd be a good couple of weeks, wouldn't it? But I don't vote Labour. And the reason I don't vote Labour is that Labour supports the renewal of Trident. Right? And Trident is positioned just up the road from where I live in Glasgow. And the reason Trident is up the road from Glasgow is in case there's an accident. Right? Think about it. If there's a nuclear war, London is fucking getting it. The Russians aren't sitting there going, don't blow up London, we'll only destroy our own floods. London's gone. The reason Trident is up the road from Glasgow is in case it blows up accidentally. And if that happens, it won't even be the top story on the British news that day. It'll be in the sports roundup or something. In other news, it looks like Aberdeen will win the Scottish Premiership this year. As Celtic's squad are now a huddle of screaming shadows. What the fuck happens in Aberdeen anyway? I don't think I've ever really got a proper handle on the place. The two statistics that I know about it are that it has Scotland's biggest fun fair, doesn't it? Which is weird. You wouldn't really naturally associate Aberdeen with the concept of fun. It's a bit like hearing there's a giant elocution centre in Fife. Do you know what I mean? And the other one is always that Aberdeen has half the rainfall of Miami, presumably because quite a lot of your rain falls as sleet, hail and snow. Right? I often wonder, are there people in Miami looking up at a rainstorm going, wish the fuck I was in Aberdeen right now. This would be over in half the time and I'd be able to get myself down that fun fair. I can't really see the front row too well. I like this guy though, man. You look like a male model or something. Fronting a campaign urging women not to leave their drinks unattended. What's your story, man? You from here? From Troon? Who would move from Troon to here? Are you in witness protection or something? What do you do up here?
Work offshore.
You work offshore? 2 weeks straight, 2 weeks gay? Was that? Can we hear it for Catherine King? Take care of yourselves, Aberdeen, all the best.